Hi everybody, and this is JJ, and we're back again with another ASUS PCDIY hardware stream. In this stream, we're going to be taking a closer look, or essentially a first look, at our Intel Z790 TUF Gaming Plus based motherboard. This is going to be the entry into our TUF Gaming lineup, and also is going to help to round out our current first look previews on our ASUS Z790 series motherboards when we talk about our gaming lineup. If you're interested in finding about the ROG Maximus series, as well as the ROG Strix series of motherboards, make sure to check out those corresponding first look previews. Now with the TUF Gaming Plus, the great thing about this board is really going to, I think, be its price point and its overall really solid set of features, functions, and specifications, which really aligns with a lot of first-time builders, as well as builders that are looking to maximize their budget. This, just like the ROG Strix Z790 A motherboard, is going to be a DDR4 based motherboard, and so this is going to give you a little bit more flexibility at coming at a lower price point for your build, but still offering very good performance, as DDR4 can still offer impressive efficiency with good timings, and it still has overclocking margin when it comes to being able to support higher DRAM dividers as well. You add to that, of course, the performance that you're going to be seeing with either a 12th gen or of course 13th gen series CPUs, as this motherboard can support either one of them, and you've got a lot of flexibility to be able to tailor your build to be able to build a great foundation for a gaming system without spending too much money, and also not compromising on a lot of key specifications that are going to benefit you right now as well as in the future. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this board. But before we jump into that, do keep in mind that this is, again, a first look preview, so we can't dive into performance, and there are going to be certain performance features, functions, and specifications that we can't get into yet until the performance embargo lifts. All right. So first up, I do want to go ahead and spend a little bit of time to offer some insight in terms of ASUS's gaming lineup. Now, a lot of times we get questions regarding, hey, can you help me understand what's really the difference between, like, let's say the TUF Gaming, the ROG Strix series, and the ROG Maximus series? I know that there's definitely a price point difference, right? But you might not necessarily understand if there's an actual difference in terms of the kind of the features, functions, specifications, or the perceived quality, or things along those lines. Well, the good thing that I can first and foremost tell you is that when you talk about the overall quality, you can expect a consistent quality product across any one of the motherboards within these series. Regardless that the TUF Gaming series is our entry into our gaming lineup, it doesn't mean that you're compromising on the overall quality, reliability, or durability. And you're also still going to be able to ensure that you get a great overclocking experience. In fact, the TUF Gaming series have been definitely community favorites in this regard, as offering you a great foundation for those that are, interested in tweaking and tuning and being able to get a little bit more out of their systems. Really, where the main difference is going to come into play isn't going to be whether the motherboard is going to compromise, let's say, a stock or overclock configuration relative to the reliability or the stability of the platform, but it's going to be actually in very specific areas that would be related to specifications. An example of this is that the TUF Gaming motherboard might have less high-speed USB ports than the ROG Strix or the ROG Maximus. The ROG Maximus board will offer Thunderbolt, while, let's say, the TUF Gaming motherboard will not offer Thunderbolt. You'll also have a difference in terms of the total number of ports that might exist on the rear of the motherboard. You'll have differences in terms of the audio design, where here you have a TUF Gaming isolated audio design, which also has a DTS suite for some audio customization, but it won't be on the same level, whether in relation to the software or to the hardware, compared to the ROG Strix or the ROG Maximus. Where, let's say, the ROG Strix has a higher performing audio codec with the SavvyTech amp and the Sonic Studio 3 software suite, and the ROG Maximus takes it even further by not only having a higher grade audio codec, but also an ESS Saber DAC and amp built on board. There's also more maybe niche functions or features which you might not necessarily utilize, right? So there's no necessarily value in terms of you adopting a motherboard that gives you these great features, but might not be something you're using. An example of this could be dedicated water cooling zone headers, which are designed for temperature inlet and outlet and flow monitoring, differential dye sense voltage monitoring, which offers more advanced options for kind of overclocking and tweakers and tuners, as well as even kind of more advanced aesthetic designs, right? Where here you have a 3-layered polymo lighting display, and here you have a large, robust acrylic RGB lighting display, and here you just have 2 basic RGB lighting zones on the edge of the motherboard. You then maybe round this out with, say, differences like the M.2 base configuration, where here you've got 4 M.2 SSDs, which is fantastic, but on the Dash E it can also support PCIe Gen 5 M.2 base SSDs, and the Maximus board actually supports up to 5 M.2 base SSDs. So just goes to show you a couple of the differences, or actually a few of the differences that you could see between kind of the good, the better, and the best when it comes to our gaming lineup. That being noted, let's go ahead and now spend a little bit more time and actually directly take a closer look at this actual motherboard, and help you to kind of understand actually how many boards we're going to have in terms of the TUF Gaming lineup. Well, we're going to have 2 motherboards, and specific to North America, we're initially only going to be carrying just the TUF Gaming Plus Wi-Fi version. That means that the great thing is that you're going to be able to be having the best kind of wireless experience on this motherboard, as it will come with Wi-Fi 6E, and also will have higher than standard gigabit with 2.5 gigabit base networking. In the foreseeable future, you may potentially see a DDR5 variant, just like what we did for Z690, but initially, in terms of North American release, we will only carry the Wi-Fi version. And outside of the US, you may see essentially a Wi-Fi version and a non-Wi-Fi version, but all the other kind of core features, functions, specifications will essentially be identical. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the board itself. As you can see right here, it's got a really nice, clean, monochromatic color scheme. There's no colors to contend or compete with your build. I think it looks fantastic, and of course, it's going to really complement the wide range of TUF Gaming components that we have to offer, from, of course, chassis to AIOs to power supplies to fans to graphics cards to peripherals. We pretty much now have a almost equally comprehensive product portfolio that we do on the ROG Strix side, and the ROG side is now also existing on the TUF Gaming side. So I think it's going to be a great foundation for those of you, and then also those that don't really like a lot of RGB on the motherboard. This is a great option as one. You can disable it, but there's only 2 minimal RGB lighting zones on this motherboard. So with that, let's go ahead and pull up our closer images here. We'll get ready to also throw this on our secondary camera so that we can take a closer look at it. But let's go ahead and bring up a little bit of a high-res single image so we can take a look at the board, and you can see it right there. It looks fantastic. It has our updated TUF Gaming Vector ID design language, which adds, I think, a real level of kind of confidence and rigidity. Some nice kind of hard angles and vectors that are in there that I think look fantastic. As I noted, very minimal in terms of any type of fixed colors. You'll see just a little bit of the TUF Gaming accent color right there, and then down here in terms of PCIe. And do keep in mind that pretty much if you were to install a graphics card, it's going to pretty much block this and this, so you wouldn't really see any colors, and the board's pretty much going to be a great foundation for pretty much all of the components that are out there, that the majority of them are black. So it's going to be a great option for those of you that just want to have something that looks clean and, you know, definitely doesn't, you know, have, I think, a lot of lighting that, you know, you might feel that could kind of take away from the overall clean and kind of refined aesthetic that the board offers. All right. Now, for those of you that do appreciate RGB lighting, it does feature 2 RGB lighting zones, one right here and another right here. And you also do have a good ARGB connectivity. So a nice upgrade is that there's going to be a total of 4 headers. So there's 2 right here, 1 4-pin and 1 3-pin. And then down here at the bottom, you have 2 more 3-pins. So that means you have a total of 3 ARGB headers. And yes, you can go ahead and use an ARGB splitter cable if you wanted to, or an ARGB hub of some type, so that if you want to have 2, 3, 4, 5 ARGB devices connected to a single header, you can do that. Just keep in mind that if you do go that route, the devices that are essentially connected to a single header are going to be essentially in a mirrored configuration, meaning that if you set one single color output value like red or rainbow mode, it's going to apply to all the devices that are connected to that single header. Okay. Now, beyond that, let's go ahead and maybe throw this board underneath our secondary cam to go ahead and take a little bit of a closer look and just kind of get, again, a deeper kind of sense of the overall ID design on this motherboard. And do keep in mind that this board can pretty much be identical to what we're going to have when it comes to the non-Wi-Fi based version. The only difference essentially is going to be that one has Wi-Fi and the other one doesn't have Wi-Fi. And for those of you who may not be aware, do keep in mind that Wi-Fi based controllers also do provide Bluetooth. So if you do want Bluetooth for like a keyboard, a mouse, a headset, for different types of items, that is also something that you would want to keep in mind there. So here we can see we've got the board. You'll be able to notice a little bit more of that design language. It looks quite nice in terms of the motherboard right there. In terms of the updated ID design, see a lot of those heat sinks which look clean, robust, and very performant. 2 large heat sinks right here. Now that's going to also be, let's say, a difference if you go into some of the higher end ROG Strix or of course the Maximus series. You're going to have not only even larger performing heatsink assemblies, but heat pipes. But again, whether you're running stock or overclocked, this is going to give you a great foundation for your build. Large robust VRM heatsink, and then another large extended VRM heatsink, which makes dual contact. Both of these make contact with the power stages underneath here, as well as with the inductors or the chokes. So you have a very solid VRM heatsink design that's going to be present here. And then moving down, you can see large, robust M.2 based heatsinks, where you've got one M.2 heatsink here, And then you have 2 more M.2 slots that are there, along with a large M.2 base heatsink. So overall, quite nice. So this board does offer a total of 4 M.2 slots, and you'll see that there's only 1 that doesn't have an M.2 based heatsink. But many high performance based drives come with their own heatsink, so generally it shouldn't be any issues in that regard. But overall, a very nice, clean design aesthetic that's present on this motherboard. Okay. So let's go ahead and maybe take a little bit of a closer look and evaluate the actual overall power delivery, the VRM design that we have here on the motherboard. So when we're taking a closer look right here, this section, of course, is going to be the VRM. You're going to see these nice high quality inductors right there. The power stages are underneath here. You have, of course, the capacitors. And like the hallmark has always been on TUF Gaming series products is that these do also meet mil-spec validation, which just helps to ensure an additional level of kind of durability and reliability. But it definitely doesn't stop there. I do think that we want to go ahead and, like, say, take even a little bit of closer look and help you understand what we're doing in terms of the overall power delivery design. So let me go ahead and actually see if I can bring up an image right here in terms of the VRM assembly. Let me go ahead and just situate that board right there. And we'll take a closer look right here. All right, now in terms of the overall power delivery on the TUF Gaming based motherboard, as we're going to show you right here, it's actually quite solid with a 16+1 configuration, 60 amp based power stages. These are Dr. Moss based power stages. And so overall, this is going to really help to ensure that you have a stable and reliable operation when it comes to the board. Being under load, again, whether stock or overclocked. Now, when we take a look right here, you can see the actual teamed power stage configuration. What we mean by a teamed power stage configuration is that the actual power stages are working in concert with each other. So they're grouped essentially two of them work in concert to be able to help us to realize better transient response performance. Now, why do we want this better transient response performance? Well, as we moved into an era where you have, very high performance based CPU cores, where you have a lot of cores, a lot of threads, you're dynamically, switching up the frequency, going from idle states to, of course, load states, you really want a power delivery design which has been designed to complement this type of response. And so that's what we've achieved with our team power stage design, which has really been proven generation after generation now as being offering great stability and reliability, again, whether stock or overclocked. It also offers a nice thermal balancing along with our overall PCB design, VRM design, and heatsink assembly design. So again, you can feel quite confident in terms of the overall power delivery that is going to be present on the board. So next up, let's go ahead and move beyond the power delivery and let's say maybe take a closer look at the actual I/O on the motherboard. I do want to also wrap one last point up when it comes to the VRM that also kind of aligns a little bit with overclocking, and that's that sometimes people focus too much on just the core power components. It's important to keep in mind the kind of total holistic board design where everything from the PCB itself to the power componentry to how it's been implemented to, of course, the thermal solution, the heatsink assembly, and then critically the firmware itself. ASUS has really kind of maintained itself as really being the leader in the industry when it comes to the quality of its UEFI BIOS and its kind of stability, its functionality, and its overclocking experience. And when you kind of combine that all together, that's really the best way to kind of evaluate performance and overclocking when you're talking about a motherboard. It's not just looking at one specific area, but really evaluating it from all these different elements so that you have kind of a holistic understanding of what really affects that. Because, if you kind of equivalently did this to, let's say, a car and you were only evaluating it by pure horsepower, but weren't considering like the power to weight ratio, the transmission, the brakes, so many types of different aspects, it wouldn't really be that great of a driving experience. You would really want to make sure that all of the elements are carefully balanced to be able to ensure a great experience, right? So next up, let's go ahead and take a look at the connectivity. Connectivity is quite solid for this board. Again, especially if you're running an older platform from a few years ago, this is where you can definitely see a nice little bit of an upgrade when it comes to the overall connections that will be made available to you. So taking a look here at the rear I/O, you're going to see it does feature an integrated I/O shield, which is fantastic. That helps to improve ESD and EMI concerns in terms of just that it offers better protection than a non-integrated I/O shield. And you'll actually see that in terms of the actual connections right there, it's quite solid. So 2 ports, 4 ports, 6 ports, and then we can see we have 2 USB-C ports. So we have a total of 8 ports. It's quite nice, and all of these are actually high-speed based ports. There's no legacy USB 2 ports. We then also have DisplayPort, HDMI 2.5 gigabit, Wi-Fi 6 that's present on this board as opposed to Wi-Fi 6E, so you still get really, really great Wi-Fi. And do keep in mind that while this is backwards compatible with AC-based routers, so you can be able to get the best experience, you would want to pair this with a Wi-Fi 6 router. You're also going to get Bluetooth on the motherboard, multi-channel audio, and optical out. And do keep in mind that for speeds, you're also going to get 10 gigabits and even a 20 gigabit space port. In our polling that we've actually conducted with users, we found that many users actually really only have a device that goes up to 5 gigabits. That means with a 20 gigabit port, that's 4 times their fastest device. So you could still add in a hub and still be able to break that down to, let's say, 5 gigabits. So 5 gigabits, 10 gigabits, and 20 gigabits that are on there. Overall, a great set of specifications in terms of the I/O. Now, just for kind of reference, I do want to see, let's go ahead and maybe pull up another motherboard just so that we can see the difference. If we were wondering kind of what do I get if I was to go to maybe a higher end based motherboard. So, you know, I guess we could maybe go to the Dash F as kind of an example right here. And then we can also, we can go to the Hero. Yeah, so that gives us kind of 3 different boards that we can kind of evaluate and see the type of I/O experience that we're talking about when it comes to these 3 boards. So we've got 1, we've got 2 with the Strix F, and then we have here the TUF Gaming. Okay, perfect. So when we take a look here at the connectivity, we can see this is our TUF Gaming board. So again, 2, 4, 6, 8 ports. But if we look at the Dash F, you can see the Dash F gives us 2, 4, so that's 6. And then we have another 4 right here, so that's going to be 10, and then we have 12. So you can see we have more ports, although a few of these are going to be USB 2. But there are also going to be other upgrades that you're going to have here, such as Wi-Fi 6E, and you're also going to have a clear CMOS button and USB BIOS flashback on the back of this motherboard. Now, when you take a look at the Hero is in an entirely another segment and moves up to even more USB-C with 3 USB-C, and it also has Thunderbolt 4 on here. So that means that you're going to have a 40 gigabit space connection. So that's quite nice in terms of that. And these are also all high speed based ports. So this just helps you to kind of understand this is where the differences are starting to lie. It's not so much that there are, of course, differences in the VRM, which there definitely are. As you move over to an RG Strix based model, it would offer higher performing power stages and also a higher teamed power stage configuration. And with the RG Maximus, it would equally offer a significantly higher, of course, VRM design, and also even other components would be upgraded, such as 10K rated capacitors and microfine alloy inductors, and there would be other changes to the PCB and the VRM. So there's a lot of kind of subtle areas that get improved upon as you move from board series to the next board series to the next board series. Now, staying in the theme in terms of connectivity, let's go ahead and take a closer look at the board itself so that we can see what type of connectivity we have here in terms of the front I/O. So taking a closer look here, you can see we've got our USB internal Type-C connector. Now, a difference that you'll have here, again, compared to maybe one of the higher end motherboards, will be that on higher end boards, you'll have a 20 gigabit space internal connector. Again, if you're not utilizing a 20 gigabit space device, you're not necessarily going to provide a benefit from this. Most users generally are using that front port for a basic like flash drive, and most of the flash drives are generally going to be up to about 500 megabytes. So again, you don't need to even have a port that would be 20 gigabits. 10 gigabits would already be over kind of the standard, but it's still nice to know because there are now definitely more chassis that are now coming with USB-C. You then have a legacy USB 3 that's on there. And then moving down here at the bottom of the board, you have 2 USB 2 headers, which of course are going to be great for things like AIO coolers or different types of controllers that do utilize an internal USB port on the motherboard. All right. So that takes care of the overall connectivity. Next up, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about PCIe that is going to be based on the motherboard. So PCIe, of course, can be broken down in a few different ways. You have PCIe that can come from the CPU, PCIe that can come from the chipset. You, of course, with this platform have PCIe Gen 5 support, and then also potentially PCIe Gen 5 support for M.2 based SSDs. But as here, we're in a lower price band, and also the reality is that PCIe Gen 4 is not necessarily even required to have a great gaming experience, as PCIe Gen 3 is already more than fast enough, especially when you talk about the general usage metrics that you would have for gaming, whether it's installing the game, launching the game, applying patches and things along those lines. Generally, users that benefit the most from the higher sequential performance from the best performing M.2 SSDs will generally have some type of prosumer or more professional workflow as opposed to necessarily gaming. Okay. But with that, let's go ahead and break things down in terms of the actual configuration on what we have on here on the board. As I noted, you've got a physical by 16 slot that's going to be on here, which is going to be great. And that is, of course, going to be for your graphics card. And that would allow you to support up to PCI Express Gen 5 that would be present on this motherboard. So if we take a look here at the board, right, you've got one physical by 16 slot, and then you have an electrical by slot. Electrical means that's actually what it's operating at, and physical just means that that's the dimensions of the slot. Sometimes you can have a slot like this, which is physically by 16, but electrically it'll be far less. So do keep that in mind. But you do have flexibility here in terms of being able to add in additional add-in cards. So maybe if you wanted to upgrade to like Wi-Fi 6E, or if you wanted to upgrade to another M.2 add-in card, right, that you could slot in, maybe, you know, higher performing network adapter, right? You have lots of options, a capture card. All of these things could fit into, you know, the by 1 or the by 4 or the physical by 16 slot if you're looking for expansion support. So that is going to cover you in terms of PCIe. And again, this slot right here does fully support PCI Express Gen 5, and that's fully backwards compatible with PCIe Gen 4. So next here, we've got our SATA and our M.2 storage. So we can see we've got 2 ports right there that are on the motherboard, and then we've got 2 ports down here. Now, in terms of your overall M.2 expansion support, you've got 1 slot right there, another slot there, and then there's going to be 2 that's going to be under here. So that means you have a total of 4 slots that are available to you. And the main differential, as opposed to, like I said, some higher end boards like the ROG Strix-E, is going to be the support for M.2 PCIe Gen 5. So here on this board, you are going to have support for multiple M.2 SSDs, but you do have to account for the different PCI Express buses that would be provided in terms of your drives. And all slots are always going to be fully backwards compatible. So if it's a PCIe Gen 4 slot and you have a PCIe Gen 3 based device, it would be fully functioning. And later on, even if you bought a PCIe Gen 5 drive, it would also work in a PCIe Gen 4 slot. So you're still maintaining a lot of flexibility. I mean, about the only thing here that you would want to be mindful of is that you don't get a heatsink, but I guess I noted many of the high performing M.2 SSDs are already going to come included with their own heatsink. So it's not a big loss in that regard. Now, if we go ahead and put our board back under there, we'll actually find a couple of cool things that we do have here. So depending on the last time that maybe you put together a system, or you know, whether or not you've seen maybe some of the more recent base motherboard designs, there are some cool elements that, even though here we are looking at a little bit more of an entry-based board, we're still going to definitely get some nice kind of design points. So let's go ahead and take a closer look here. We've got our TUF Gaming board. I'm going to go ahead and remove this primary M.2 heatsink. Again, you've got essentially 3 heatsinks. This one's one very long heatsink, but it would cover 2 drives, and then we have one right here for the primary. So one thing that we did go ahead and do that we're maintaining is going to be the use of capped screws. That means essentially when you remove these screws, you don't have to worry about them falling off or kind of going somewhere. It's a very kind of straightforward process. You'll of course see the heatsink, and then you'll see your thermal pad. And then right there we have our M.2 SSD slot. And the cool thing too, when it comes to these M.2 SSD slots, is that it does also feature our Q-Latch design. So you'll see if I angle that drive in there, right, and I go ahead and just lock that in place, now my M.2 SSD has gone ahead and been locked in, and I'm good to go. I didn't have to worry about putting a standoff, a small screw, having to magnetize it, use a precision tip screwdriver. The only 2 screws I have to worry about are just going to be for the heatsink. So it's a very simple and easy and effective process. Now, one thing you're going to want to keep in mind again is if we're talking about upgrades is that on the TUF Gaming model here, you have definitely a nice solid heatsink design, no overall concerns in that respect. But if we do compare this to, let's say, a higher performing board like the ROG Strix series, there is going to be a bit of a difference in terms of how the actual heatsink design has been implemented. And this also would apply to higher end boards like the the Maximus Hero, where it's going to feature multiple M.2 heatsinks. So let's go ahead and take a closer look here at the ROG Strix board, just for kind of a reference. And we'll be able to see here what I'm talking about. So if we take a look right here, you'll see a very large, much higher performing, of course, M.2 based heatsink design. But the main difference is actually really going to come in that if we remove this heatsink, we're going to see that we have access to the underside. And when we take a look there at the underside, you'll see that you have a secondary actually heatsink and thermal pad. The reason being is that now many new modern M.2 SSDs are going to have NAND on the front along with the controller, and then also NAND on the back. So as you get into 2 terabyte, 4 terabyte, 8 terabyte M.2 SSDs and larger ones in the future, ideally to be able to ensure the best thermal performance, the best stability for the drive under heavy load is going to be having this dual contact heatsink design. And so that is going to be the benefit of going over to, again, to a higher end based motherboard. But it is not going to be critical in the majority of situations. A user does not have to have this to be able to ensure that their M.2 SSDs are going to be working accordingly without any issues. So overall, no worries in that regard, but it is something that you just kind of want to be mindful of in terms of being a design differential. Okay. Now, another item here to kind of show you that I think is pretty cool is going to be the actual Q-Release design. So let me just finish getting this screw in here. And I'm going to grab our graphics card so that we can go ahead and check this function out. So one of the cool things here is if we again go back and take a little bit of a closer look, we'll see right here that we have our PCI Express slot, right? But you'll see right here we've got this button. This is our new Q-Release feature that we implemented for the first time in Z690. And one of the really cool things is we've now expanded it here to the TUF Gaming based motherboard. So right here I've got a large graphics card, a TUF Gaming based graphics card. I'm going to put it into our primary PCI Express slot. And so you can see right here that because I got a little bit of an opening, it is a little bit easier. I could actually push down right here, but still, if this heatsink was a little bit taller, and even right now, it's actually covering the latch, so it is a little bit difficult to access. So the great thing now is that you don't have to worry about that. You do have this Q-Release button. So if I go ahead and depress on this button, and I pull the graphics card out, it goes ahead and ejects the graphics card, and I'm good to go. So again, let's go ahead and just show you that. I install the graphics card, and if I hold it down, you can see I can't actually pull the graphics card out because it is locked in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and depress that, and it will remove the graphics card for me. So really nice, streamlined feature. Just overall, just makes the build experience just that much better when you have nice features and kind of functions like that. So pretty cool. Taking a closer look here at the board as well, we've got, of course, our audio design, which is going to be present here. So if we do continue our tour here, you'll see the actual audio design right here. This is the kind of isolated audio design. It's kind of like a moat essentially, and this helps to maximize the overall onboard audio codec. We have audio grade capacitors that are on there. It does also come included with the DTS audio suite, which allows you to have some customization in terms of EQ and also some specialized presets for certain types of games. So it does still help to improve the overall analog experience, especially if you're going to be pairing this up with kind of your standard headsets. And do keep in mind, we've got some great analog based headsets in terms of our TUF Gaming H series headsets, which would be a great option. But if you do go over to, let's say, one of our digital based headsets, whether on the TUF Gaming or the ROG or the ROG Strix line, do keep in mind essentially bypassing that audio design that's going to be present on the motherboard. All right. So next up, in terms of kind of just some of the PCDIY design points, we did kind of talk a little bit about these already. So if we again head back over to the board, we can see right here at the top, we've got things like our QLED. So that's a 4 LED diagnostic system for the CPU, the DRAM, the graphics card, and for the boot device. Of course, we have that quick release based design right there. We talked about the Q-Latch design, which also allows us to easily install M.2 based SSDs that are going to be present on this motherboard, right? We've of course got all those nice heat sinks there for multiple M.2 based SSDs. They're also going to be there. We do have the integrated I/O shield, which is always a nice touch to have on a motherboard, where you can see the I/O shield is actually integrated on the back of the motherboard. That actually also helps to reduce EMI and ESD issues. So that is something else you may not be aware of. And then a subtle item also that you may not be aware of is going to be the ProCool power connectors. These are thicker pins that are in there that help to increase the actual current handling performance. So that is going to be another upgrade that, of course, works in concert with the solid VRM design that we have on here and the good heat sinks we also have on this board. So overall, you can definitely see that the TUF Gaming is offering a very solid set of features, functions, and specifications, especially for, I think, the vast majority of gamers, where, again, the majority of gamers are not going to be saturating or fully utilizing a PCIe Gen 4 drive. And so moving the fact that it doesn't have PCI Express Gen 4, in terms of an M.2 slot, is not going to be an overall big loss. You still, of course, have PCI Express Gen 5 for the actual primary PCI slot, of course, for the next generation of graphics cards when they eventually do implement that technology. So that is going to be a welcomed addition. Now, beyond that, there are just a few things that I do want to go ahead and touch on in terms of kind of some features and functions that are nice there. Of course, this board is going to still maintain things like our fan expert technology, which the great thing about it is that you'll be able to access the actual fan controls, whether you're inside the UEFI BIOS or within the operating system. Now, if I switch over here to my demo system right here, we can see that we're within the OS environment, and it's quite simple. So right now we're taking a look at an ROG design aesthetic, but we can actually swap this out if we want to. And when it's on a TUF Gaming motherboard, it would actually default to the TUF Gaming logo and TUF Gaming kind of ID design language for that. You would be able to access all your devices right there, including actually being able to go into Fan Expert. Fan Expert would allow you to go ahead and calibrate and control all your connected fans. Again, you can do this within the operating system if you're looking for some functionality, or if you're, of course, looking for no software experience, you can also do this within the UEFI BIOS. But you can see the benefit here of doing it within the OS is you can set custom fan curves if you want to. You can go from smart mode to fixed mode. You can, of course, change to different presets. And you also have temperature input mapping, which is available to you, so you could select a different temperature source. For many users, it might be beneficial to consider the GPU as a temperature source. You control your fan speed, this is for your kind of ramping up and ramping down, and also whether or not you would want actually your fans to go to a fan stop mode, essentially being effectively inaudible because they're not spinning. That's great when you talk about maybe you're just, reading some email, checking out some websites, checking out some photos, right? Watching a stream online, whatever it might be. Going with that type of functionality when you talk about the fan stop mode is really a great way to be able to have a very quiet system, right? And also even actually maximize the lifespan of your fans because they're not actively kind of taking away from their mean time in between failures in terms of the rating that they have for those fans. So overall, that's another nice feature that is going to be present there. And of course, for those that are kind of going to be tweakers and tuners, while it doesn't feature our ASUS AIOC technology, do keep in mind that you still have a robust and very competent based UEFI BIOS environment so that you can go in and you can make all your tunes, your tuning parameters, whether it's going to be to the DRAM, whether it's going to be to the CPU. Really, the main benefit I would say with an ROG class is just that there's going to even be more nuanced, more advanced kind of specialized features and functions in relation to performance tuning and overclocking. Plus, you're also going to get the benefit of the ASUS AIOC technology, which if you're not aware of what it is, make sure to go ahead and check out our ASUS AIOC overview video, which will walk you through how we take, hundreds of samples and thousands of hours of kind of permutations and testings, and we distill that down into the firmware level to be able to go ahead and detect your CPU, your cooling solution, and be able to automatically apply an effective, efficient, and reliable overclock, which really does help to offer a streamlined experience if you make the investment in a nice board, a nice CPU, and a nice cooling solution. Here, you can definitely still, again, overclock. You're just going to have to go and do it manually within the UEFI BIOS, or you can also utilize a utility like Intel XTU. So for the most part, that pretty much wraps up all the key elements that we want to be able to go ahead and touch on in terms of the TUF Gaming based motherboard. Again, do keep in mind that this is a DDR4 based motherboard, and in North America, we will only have the Wi-Fi based edition. But I think this is going to be a great choice for those of you that are a little bit more on a budget, still looking for great performance, regardless of whether you're going to be putting a 12th gen or a 13th gen series based processor in there. Definitely make sure to check out the TUF Gaming series. And again, if you're kind of wondering about a compare and contrast, check out our other first look previews on the ROG Strix series and the ROG Maximus series. You can also make sure to join our ASUS PCDIY group and ask your questions there. I myself am involved in that group, and we also have a passionate community of over 35,000 members that would love to be able to provide you maybe some insight and support in terms of your next PCDIY build. So with that, take care, take it easy, enjoy the rest of your day. Don't forget to drop us a like and a subscribe and your comments down below. So with that, best of luck with your build.